group called the Essenes. They were kind of like the ultimate ancient mystery cult.
Oh, yeah.
Ancient Judea, think secret societies, hidden scrolls, whispers of like ancient wisdom and all that.
And probably a good bit of speculation mixed in too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Speculation galore.
Yep.
Which is why we are here to do a deep dive into their world. You've given me some fascinating sources for this one. We've got, let's see, excerpts from Wikipedia, always a good place to start.
Of course, gotta have Wikipedia.
And then a peek at this Essene Gospel of Peace, this text that's, well, it's caused some controversy. Let's just say that.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
I'm intrigued.
And then we've got this really frustrating fragment of an article from, get this, The Classical Difference.
The Classical Difference. Okay.
Yeah, so it's like we're piecing together this historical puzzle, but like some of the pieces are missing and some might be from a completely different box, you know.
I like that analogy. That's good.
So our mission, if we choose to accept it, I'm sure we will, is to separate fact from fiction, explore the core teachings of this mysterious gospel of peace, and maybe uncover why this group that existed like over 2,000 years ago still, people are still fascinated by them today.
It's a worthy challenge, but I gotta warn you, the Essenes are kind of notorious for, well, they were good at keeping secrets. Even the things we think we know about them, there's a lot of debate.
All right, challenge accepted. But let's start with the basics. Who exactly were the Essenes? What do we actually know about them, like from a historical perspective?
Okay, well, according to our good friend Wikipedia, the Essenes were a Jewish sect that emerged sometime around the 2nd century BCE during what's known as the Second Temple period.
Okay, so picture ancient Judea, right? It's just buzzing with religious and political tension. The Romans are starting to make their presence known. You've got different Jewish factions all vying for power. And in the midst of all this, you've got the Essenes just doing their own thing.
Yeah, precisely. They were kind of like the religious counterculture of their day. They were known for this very strict adherence to Jewish law, big emphasis on ritual purity, and they were really into this communal lifestyle.
Kind of like the original minimalists?
Maybe, yeah.
But, you know, with more rituals and ancient prophecies and all that.
Exactly. They believed in living simply, sharing their possessions, dedicating themselves to, spiritual growth. They had this strong emphasis on communal living. Some scholars even think they established their own settlements, almost like, ancient communes, where they could practice their beliefs without interference from, the outside world and all its drama.
And this is where I'm guessing the Dead Sea Scrolls come in.
Right, we got it.
This treasure trove of ancient texts, the ones found in those caves near the Dead Sea.
Right.
Often linked to the Essenes.
Yeah, it's like one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle, but also it's one of the most debated. The prevailing theory, and I think this is what you'll find in most like textbooks and stuff, is that the Essenes were at least the authors or the caretakers of at least some, if not all, of those scrolls. And like the scrolls themselves, they've got this really fascinating mix of biblical texts, commentaries, even rules for communal living, which seem to line up with what we know about, Essene practices.
But like any good mystery, there are always twists and turns. So what are some of the challenges to this whole Essene Dead Sea Scrolls connection?
Well, not everyone's convinced. One really prominent scholar, Norman Gold, he's argued that the scrolls might actually represent a much broader spectrum of Jewish thought. Not just this one sect. He points to, the sheer diversity of the texts, for one thing, and for another, the presence of a nearby cemetery. But here's the thing, that cemetery. They found graves of women and children.
Interesting.
Which doesn't really fit with the image of this, strictly celibate Essene community that some scholars have proposed.
So the plot thickens. We've got ritual purity, communal living, maybe some apocalyptic prophecies thrown in there, and now this potential connection to the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Essenes were busy. But where does this Essene Gospel of Peace fit into all of this? Because this isn't part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, right?
Correct. Totally separate text and its origins. Even more shrouded in mystery. And that's where things get really, really interesting.
Yeah, the Essene Gospel of Peace, it's a curious text, to say the least. So it was published back in the 1930s by this researcher named Edmond Bordeaux-Secley. And, well, he claimed to have discovered, get this, ancient manuscripts containing lost Essene teachings.
Okay, hold on. Stop right there. That's like a Dan Brown novel waiting to happen.
Right.
Lost manuscripts, secret societies, ancient wisdom. Did he also find a map to the Holy Grail while he was at it?
You're not far off. Here's the thing, though. There's zero, independent verification of any of his claims.
Oh, really?
The Essene Gospel of Peace, it's not part of any official Dead Sea Scroll findings.
And its authenticity. hotly debated, to put it mildly. Some scholars, they see echoes of, genuine Essene thought in there, the pages. But others, they're like, nope, this is just, it's made up. A well-intentioned, maybe, but ultimately fictionalized account.
So it's like a historical game of telephone.
Maybe
Suckley started with some, like, genuine fragments, right, of Essene belief, and then was like, I'm going to add in my own interpretations, and maybe even, like, a bit of creative flair.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, remember, he was writing in the early 20th century. This was a time when there was this huge growing fascination with all this esoteric knowledge, alternative spiritualities, So it's very possible he was influenced by just the cultural currents of his time.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But even if we, like, take the Gospel of Peace with a grain of salt, it kind of offers this fascinating glimpse into a different way of seeing the world, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's what makes it so intriguing, right? It's full of these teachings about health, spirituality, living in harmony with nature, all this stuff that really resonates with people even today.
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's dive into the specifics. What were some of the key themes you, picked up on from the excerpt you read?
Well, one that really jumped out at me was just this central role of the earthly mother. This concept, it's woven throughout the entire text. And it kind of presents this vision of the divine feminine as intertwined with nature, the physical world, all of that.
This is where that classical difference fragment might have been really helpful. It seemed to be touching on something similar, maybe even making a connection between this whole earthly mother idea and ancient goddess traditions.
Yeah, it's a shame we don't have the full article, isn't it?
I know, right?
But even without it, we can see how the Gospel of Peace really, really stresses this deep reverence for nature, which is something that's hinted at in other sources on the Essenes, but it's not really explored as explicitly in those, is it?
So maybe it's building upon this existing thread of Essene belief, but then kind of bringing it to center stage and saying, this is really important.
Exactly. And this whole reverence for the earthly mother, it also ties into the text's emphasis on natural healing.
Yeah.
There's this whole system of angels associated with the elements, air, water, sunlight, earth. They're portrayed as these sources of healing and vitality.
It's like an ancient wellness retreat. Speaking of which, I got to ask about that passage on fasting. Talk about extreme detox. It describes it as a way to, and I quote, expel Satan and his plagues. I'm assuming that's a metaphor for toxins and disease from the body.
A little on the dramatic side, sure. But it emphasizes how central this connection to nature and the physical body was to this whole worldview. And if we kind of connect it back to what we know from Josephus, the Essenes did have very, very strict dietary practices. They placed a high value on purity, both internal and external.
Okay, so maybe the Gospel of Peace is taking these existing practices, existing beliefs, and maybe just spicing them up a bit for a modern audience.
Possibly, yeah.
What else stood out to you?
The 7 laws of the Son of Man are pretty fascinating. So they basically outline this whole way of life that's based on nonviolence, vegetarianism, respect for all living creatures, and, living simply in harmony with the natural world.
It's giving me major proto-hippie vibes.
Right. And while we don't have, explicit mention of these exact laws in other sources, they really do seem to align with what we know about Essene values. The pacifism, the communal living, the emphasis on simple living, it's all connected.
It's like they were really trying to create this blueprint for a more just and compassionate world.
Yeah.
Rooted in their understanding of the divine and their place within the natural order.
And that brings us to another, I think, really intriguing point. The Gospel of Peace's interpretation of the kingdom of God. It's presented almost as this utopian ideal. A world of peace, harmony, abundance, where love reigns supreme.
Which again, kind of seems to echo those Essene beliefs about a coming messianic age.
Exactly. A time of spiritual renewal and transformation. So while we definitely have to be cautious about taking the Essene Gospel of Peace as a literal word-for-word historical account,
right,
we can still appreciate it for the way it weaves together all these different threads of belief,
yes,
and presents this really compelling vision of, an alternative way of being in the world.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've got this mysterious group, the Essenes, with their intriguing practices and this possible connection to the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Right.
And then we've got this Essene Gospel of Peace, this text that it's captivating, it's inspiring, and maybe, just maybe, a little too good to be true.
That's a pretty good summary. Yeah, it's kind of like finding this beautifully crafted treasure chest, right?
Okay.
Filled with like sparkling gems and ancient scrolls and all that. And then you look a little closer and you see that Made in China sticker on the bottom.
Ouch. So you're saying we should like just toss the gospel of peace aside completely?
Right.
As a complete fabrication?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Even if it's not, this direct pipeline to like authentic, straight from the Essenes' mouths teachings.
Right.
It still reflects this yearning, right, for a certain kind of spirituality, a way of life that emphasizes our connection to nature, inner peace, ethical living. And these themes, they clearly resonated with people back in Seckley's time.
Yeah.
And they continue to resonate, I think, with a lot of people today.
And maybe that's the real takeaway here.
Yeah.
Whether the Essene Gospel of Peace is like a word for word account of, this ancient wisdom lost to the sands of time.
Right.
Or just some, creative reimagining.
Mm-hmm.
It still speaks to this very human desire, right?
Yeah.
For meaning, connection, a way of life that aligns with our values.
Absolutely. And let's not forget those other sources that we have, right? I mean, even though they're fragmented, they're sometimes even contradictory.
Right.
Those glimpses we get from Josephus, Philo, even that tantalizing snippet from what is it called? The Classical Difference.
A classical difference.
They paint a picture, right? Of a group that was deeply, deeply committed to their beliefs, to their practices.
It really is like we're just catching these fleeting glimpses of a conversation.
Yeah.
Happening like behind closed doors. We may not be able to hear every word, but
Yeah.
we can definitely sense the passion there.
Oh, for sure.
And the depth of the ideas that are being exchanged.
Exactly. And just like with those snippets of conversation, we have to use our own judgment, our own critical thinking skills to kind of fill in the gaps, right?
Yeah.
And come to our own conclusions.
Which is what makes a deep dive like this so rewarding, honestly. We've gone beyond the surface level. We've wrestled with these complex historical questions.
Sure.
We've encountered this text that, regardless of its origins, it's still sparking debate. It's still inspiring reflection.
And we did it all without once resorting to saying, according to Wikipedia.
Oh my gosh. You're right.
Although it was our silent partner this whole time.
It really was. But that's what they say. It wouldn't be a real deep dive without a little mystery.
A
right?
little mystery, exactly. And on that note, I think we've given our listeners plenty to ponder.
We have. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into this fascinating world of history, spirituality, and the enduring power of ideas.